In 1969, a Swedish factory dropped a 14-liter V8 into a truck cab, and every rival in Europe suddenly looked slow. 6 years later, 9,500 German trucks disappeared into Siberia on a single order. A Dutch six-cylinder quietly pioneered technology that every modern diesel still uses. These were not concept vehicles, these were working machines that rewrote the rules of the road, and 10 of them, built in the 1970s, shocked the world. Here they are. Number 10. Fiat 190. Let's start in Turin, because what happened in Italy in the mid-1970s changed the map of European trucking permanently. Fiat had been building heavy trucks for decades, but the turning point came in 1970 when the Fiat 619 arrived at the shows with a brand new angular tilting cab, internally called the H-cab. It was square, upright, unmistakably Italian, and it would go on to define Italian long-haul trucks for the next 15 years. That cab is the reason a Fiat truck from 1971 and an Iveco truck from 1985 look like cousins. But the real shock wasn't a cab. It was a corporate earthquake. In 1974, Fiat's industrial vehicle division bought a 75% stake in the German manufacturer Magirus-Deutz from the Klöckner-Humboldt-Deutz Group. Then, on the 1st of January 1975, 5 separate truck makers were folded into one single company: Fiat Vicoli Industriali of Turin, OM of Brescia, Lancia Vicoli Speciali of Bolzano, Unic of France, and Magirus-Deutz of Ulm, Germany. The name of that new company was Iveco Industrial Vehicles Corporation. Think about what that meant at the time. 5 national brands, 3 countries, 3 engineering cultures, dozens of factories, and a product catalog that between 1975 and 1979 covered roughly 200 basic models and 600 variants, running from 2.5-ton vans all the way past 40 tons gross. Nobody in Europe had ever attempted industrial consolidation on that scale in commercial vehicles. Rivals watched and quietly panicked, because a group that size could spread development costs across markets in a way that a single national manufacturer simply could not. The trucks themselves were serious hardware. The flagship models of that era were the 170 and the 190 ranges, using the H-cab, and the top 190 was powered by a 17.2-liter V8 diesel rated at 330 horsepower, one of the largest engines fitted to any European road truck of the decade. For years, the trucks wore both badges, sold as Iveco Fiat, until the Fiat name was dropped entirely at the start of the 1980s. But the deal was done in 1975, and the modern European truck industry, where a handful of giant groups own almost everything, genuinely starts here. Number 9. ERF B-Series. Now to a country most people forget was once a truck-building superpower. ERF was a small, fiercely independent British manufacturer based in Sandbach, Cheshire. It didn't make its own engines, it didn't make its own gearboxes. It bought the best components available and assembled them into trucks that operators trusted. And in 1974, at the Earl's Court Motor Show, ERF unveiled something that made the giants of Europe look twice: the B-Series. The headline was the cab, and specifically what it was made of. British trucks of the era had a chronic, humiliating problem: rust. Salt on winter roads ate steel cabs alive, and a 5-year-old lorry could look a decade older. ERF's answer was the SP cab, which stood simply for steel plastic. A steel skeletal frame carried outer panels made of sheet-molded compound, a glass-reinforced composite. Plastic panels don't corrode. They also don't dent the way thin steel does, and damaged panels could be unbolted and replaced individually instead of requiring a full-body shop rebuild. This was ERF thinking decades ahead. Composite panels are normal now. In 1974, on a working truck, they were close to radical. The B-Series was also the first production ERF with a tilting cab, hydraulically raising up to 68 degrees for engine access, a must-have feature by the mid-70s. Buyers could specify Gardner, Cummins, or Rolls-Royce engines, usually with a 9-speed Fuller gearbox, though ZF and David Brown transmissions were also fitted. And crucially, a sleeper cab was offered, still a fairly new concept for British trucks at the time. A full high-roof factory sleeper followed at the 1976 show. It was not a smooth launch. Getting the composite cab to a consistent production standard took time, and sales didn't accelerate until quality was nailed down. Combined with the mid-70s economic downturn, the investment pushed ERF into a loss of around £118,000 in the 1975-76 financial year. Then the B-Series caught fire commercially. The following year, ERF posted a profit of £1.7 million. A tiny independent firm with no engine plant of its own had taken on Europe's giants using a plastic cab and won. Number 8. Ford Transcontinental. This one is strange, magnificent, and slightly tragic. By the mid-70s, Ford of Europe wanted a share of the heavy long-haul market, and it wanted it fast. So rather than develop a heavyweight truck from scratch, Ford did something almost nobody expected. It went shopping. The Transcontinental, launched in 1975, was assembled almost entirely from bought-in components, and the supplier list reads like a who's who of the industry. The cab came from Berliet in France, the KB2400. The engine came from Cummins, the legendary 14-liter inline-six, initially in NTC form, later updated to the big cam NTE generation, with outputs typically between 290 and 350 horsepower. The gearbox came from Eaton Fuller. The chassis philosophy was drawn from Ford's American heavy trucks. Final assembly happened at Ford's plant in Amsterdam, and the result was spectacular. Because the tall Cummins had to fit underneath it, the Berliet cab was mounted high on the frame, noticeably higher than on the Berliet trucks it came from. That made the Transcontinental the tallest factory cab on the market, with a commanding view of the road that drivers adored. The cab sat on 4 coil springs with hydraulic dampers and an anti-roll bar, so it floated where rivals hammered. The seats were suspended too. There were even oil and water gauges on the dash at a time when many trucks gave you a warning light and a prayer. Drivers who ran it on the long Middle East routes talk about it the way pilots talk about certain aircraft. It was strong, comfortable, and rated for gross combination weights up to 44 tons. And that last number is exactly why it failed. Britain, its most important intended market, still had a 32-ton weight limit. All that heavy-duty engineering was dead weight the operator had to pay for and could never use, and every kilogram of truck was a kilogram of payload lost. Ford kept lightening the chassis, but the sums never really worked. Production ended in the early 80s. The Amsterdam plant built 8,231 of them. A final 504 were assembled at the former Foden plant at Sandbach in Cheshire, 8,735 in total. Today, it's one of the most sought-after classic trucks in Europe, a magnificent machine launched into the wrong rulebook. Number 7. Berliet TR Series. France's contribution to this list is a cab that outlived 3 different badges. At the 1970 Paris Motor Show, Berliet revealed the GR/TR 300 with an all-new tilting cab called the KB2400, styled by the industrial designer Louis-Lucien Lepoix. In an era when many cabs were still tall, narrow boxes, this thing was square, wide, airy, and full of glass. 2 suspended seats, real storage space, a radio fitted as standard, and visibility that competitors simply couldn't match. French drivers who climbed into one and then back into a rival cab reported it felt like stepping backwards a decade. The early TR 300 stumbled badly on reliability, and the reputational damage was real. Berliet reacted quickly. The TR 280 that followed, built from 1973 to 1977, with 11,293 produced, used a turbocharged 635 series inline-six of around 266 horsepower, hauling 38 tons gross, and it became the model that restored the range's reputation. Meanwhile, the politics were moving. In 1975, under French industrial policy, state-owned Renault acquired Berliet. In 1978, Berliet was merged with Saviem to create Renault Véhicule Industrielle, and by 1980, both historic names were retired. Before that happened, Berliet fired one last spectacular shot. In 1978 came the TR 350 Centaur, a flagship long-haul tractor equipped to a standard nobody expected from a truck. Raised roof, refrigerator, air conditioning, and luxury fittings that would have looked at home in a motorhome. It arrived right as the industry was waking up to the idea that a truck cab is a driver's home for weeks at a time. But the real legacy is that cab. The KB2400 was used by Berliet. It was used by Ford on the Transcontinental, and in facelifted form it carried the Renault R Series from 1980 all the way to 1996. One cab design, 3 brands, a quarter of a century on the road. Very few pieces of truck engineering have ever earned their development budget that thoroughly. Number 6. MAN 19280. Here's a question almost nobody can answer. Why is there a lion on the front of every MAN truck? The answer is a takeover that happened in 1971. Büssing was a Braunschweig company founded in 1903 by Heinrich Büssing, and it was one of the most respected engineering names in Central Europe. Its signature technology was the underfloor engine, a diesel laid flat beneath the chassis instead of under the cab, patented in the 1930s and put into commercial vehicles from 1949. Its emblem, created in the 1920s, was the heraldic lion of Brunswick. By the end of the 60s, Büssing was in financial trouble. MAN took over the company in 1971 and its plants at Braunschweig and Salzgitter the following year. MAN inherited the underfloor engine expertise, and it also adopted the Lion. For a while, vehicles wore both marks as MAN Büssing, and the Büssing name faded out by 1979. The Lion never left. It is on MAN radiator grills to this day, a tribute to a company that has not built a truck in more than 50 years. MAN spent the decade turning that consolidated strength into product. The 19280 heavy tractor became its long-haul flagship. And in 1978, it was voted Truck of the Year, the first MAN ever to take the award and the beginning of a habit the company never lost. MAN was also busy elsewhere. It had a long-running components partnership with Savium of France, exchanging cabs for axles and engines. And at the end of the 70s, it began a light truck collaboration with Volkswagen. The 6 and 8-ton G-Series that came out of it stayed in production until 1993. MAN engineers even worked with Bosch in the early 70s on automatic vehicle guidance, using a cable buried in the center of the road, emitting control pulses that coils on the truck could read. Self-driving trucks, attempted before the microprocessor era. The Lion badge is the piece of that decade you can still see on any European motorway tonight. Number 5. Magirus-Deutz M232 D19. This is the single most astonishing export story in European truck history, and hardly anyone outside the industry knows it. Magirus-Deutz of Ulm did something almost nobody else did on heavy trucks. It cooled its diesel engines with air instead of water. No radiator, no coolant, no water pump, no hoses, no freezing, no boiling, just finned cylinders and a big fan. The engines were loud and unmistakable, and they were close to unkillable in extreme conditions, which is exactly why, in 1974, the Soviet Union came knocking. The USSR was building the Baikal-Amur main line, a colossal railway hacked through eastern Siberia, and it needed trucks that would start and keep working in a place where winter temperatures collapse far below anything a European highway ever sees. Water-cooled engines in that environment are a liability. Air-cooled engines are not. The contract, known internally as the Delta Project, covered roughly 9,500 dump trucks and flatbeds, delivered across 1975 and 1976. 2 main models made up the order. The M232 D19, a 2-axle truck with the air-cooled Fiat 413 Vate producing 232 horsepower, and the bigger 3-axle M290 D26 with the 10-cylinder Fiat 413 making 290 horsepower. These were export-only specifications, never sold on the German domestic market. To keep the price down, the Soviets even skipped the factory all-wheel drive option. It was the largest order in the company's history, largely because of it. Exports accounted for around 70% of Magirus-Deutz's total production in 1975, and the firm became the second-largest truck manufacturer in Germany that year. The relationship went further still. In 1982, Deutz sold licensing rights for Soviet production of up to 25,000 of the 413 series engines. One more thing about Magirus that's worth knowing. In 1971, it joined the Club of Four, an alliance with Volvo, DF and Savium, headquartered in Paris, formed to share the crushing cost of developing a cab for medium trucks. The resulting cab entered production in 1975 and was used by all four companies, later by Renault and Iveco, and eventually even by Mack in the United States. It stayed in production for almost 25 years. Four rivals, one cab, and none of their customers particularly minded. Number 4. DAF 2800. If you drive a modern diesel of any kind, you are benefiting from something a Dutch truck did first. DAF launched the 2800 at the Frankfurt show in September 1973. The new F241 cab was a wider development of DAF's earlier tilt cab, and the name came from its width, 241 centimeters. It was wide enough that two windscreen wipers couldn't clear it properly, so DAF fitted 3. That triple wiper front end became the visual signature of DAF's heavy trucks for the next 20 years. But the important part was underneath. The 2800 was the first European truck to carry a turbocharged and intercooled diesel engine. Turbocharging alone was well established by 1973. Intercooling, running the hot compressed air from the turbo through a heat exchanger to cool it before it enters the cylinders, was the missing piece. Cooler air is denser air. Denser air means more oxygen. More oxygen means more fuel burned properly, which means more power and better efficiency from the same displacement. Today it is on essentially every turbo diesel on Earth. In 1973, on a production truck, DAF got there first. The 11.6-liter DKS engine in its strongest form produced 320 horsepower and 1,260 Newton-meters of torque. Buyers could also choose the 280 horsepower turbocharged DKTD, the 260 horsepower DKT, or a naturally aspirated 250 horsepower DKA. Gearboxes came from ZF in 12 or 16 speeds, or Fuller with 13. From 1975, a more luxurious version was added, aimed squarely at operators running the long, brutal routes to the Middle East. There was also a piece of corporate news that raised eyebrows across the Atlantic. In 1972, International Harvester of Chicago bought a 33% stake in DAF. An American giant taking a third of a Dutch truck maker was not a small headline at the time. The F241 cab went on to serve the 2800, the 3300, and the 3600 right through until the mid-1990s. Over 20 years of production from one 1973 design, and a piece of engine technology that outlived the company that introduced it. Number 3. Mercedes-Benz NG 1632. The Mercedes on this list didn't shock anyone with a single specification. It shocked the industry with a way of thinking. The new generation NG was presented in 1973 at the Wörth plant, and it replaced everything Mercedes had been selling in the medium and heavy classes. Construction vehicles came first in 1973. The long-haul versions followed in 1974 with a cab 600 millimeters longer for sleeping. The idea underneath it was modularity, and it was ruthless. Instead of designing separate cabs for separate trucks, Mercedes designed one cab family that could be produced in multiple lengths and heights from a single set of press dies. By 1977, there were 3 variants: a short cab for tippers, a medium cab, and a long-haul sleeper cab with 2 bunks. A still larger cab arrived in 1979. Medium-duty models joined the range in 1975, sharing the same architecture. One set of tooling, one parts catalog, an enormous spread of finished trucks. Every manufacturer in the world builds this way now. The flagship engine was the OM403, a V10 of 15.95 liters producing 320 horsepower. The model that carried it, the 1632, became a legend in German haulage. And there's a specific reason that engine existed at all. West Germany was preparing legislation requiring a minimum power output per ton of gross weight, so Mercedes built ahead of the rule rather than scrambling after it. The new cab's rounded edges and slightly raked windscreen also improved aerodynamics, which cut fuel consumption at a moment when the 1973 oil crisis had made that priority number 1 overnight. Here is the real measure of how good the NG was. It stayed in production until 1988, when it was replaced by the SK, which was itself a development of the same design. And the basic cab did not die there. Derivatives have been built by FAP in Serbia and by Baban in China, and versions of that architecture have been in production somewhere in the world for over 50 years. A truck design from 1973 that never quite stopped being manufactured. That's not a product, that's an institution. Number 2. Volvo F89. The Volvo F88 had already made Sweden a serious force in European trucking. Launched in 1965 as part of Volvo's export-focused System 8 program, it was the truck that turned Volvo from a respected regional manufacturer into a genuine international competitor. Over the F88 and F89's production run, more than 61,000 were built. But the F89 is the one that made rivals nervous, and it exists because of a law. West Germany introduced a regulation setting a minimum ratio of horsepower to gross combination weight. If Volvo wanted to keep selling into the heaviest weight classes in Germany, and it very much did, it needed substantially more power. Development of a new 12-liter engine started in 1969, and the F89 followed in 1970. The T19 was a 12-liter turbocharged inline-six, producing 330 horsepower at 2,200 RPM and 1,257 Newton-meters at 1,300 RPM. The F89 was the first Volvo truck sold exclusively with turbocharged engines, no naturally aspirated option, no compromise, 16-speed gearbox, twin-plate clutch, and the ability to haul at weights that had previously been the preserve of a small handful of trucks. And it came with one of the great engineering quirks in truck history. The T19 was so tall that it had to be mounted at an angle in the chassis just to fit under the cab. That tilt made it physically impossible to convert the truck to right-hand drive. So markets that drive on the left, Britain, Ireland, Australia, and others, could not have an F89 at all. They were offered an uprated F88 with 312 horsepower instead, and had to watch the flagship go past on the other side of the channel. That's the sort of problem that only happens when engineers refuse to compromise on the engine. The F88 and F89 became icons of the long-distance Middle East runs, hauling freight from Northern Europe across Turkey and Iran on journeys that took weeks. Production ended in 1977 when Volvo replaced them with the Phaeton and F12, and 2 years after that, in 1979, Volvo introduced a raised-roof version called the Globetrotter, a name that's still on Volvo cabs today. Number 1. Scania LB140 and LB141. And at number 1, the truck that earned a nickname no marketing department could have bought, King of the Road. Scania had been working on turbocharging since the 1950s, and on a large Vate diesel through the 60s. The first DS14 ran in 1966. Series production began in 1969, and it went into a cab-over model called the LB140. The specifications stopped the industry dead. 14.2 liters, 90-degree Vate, turbocharged from the very first day it was sold. This was not a hot version of an existing engine. It was designed from the start for the pressures that forced induction creates. 350 horsepower at 2,300 RPM and 1,225 Newton-meters of torque. It was immediately the most powerful truck engine in Europe, and it held that title for years. The numbers that really mattered were the ones about hauling. Loaded to the maximum combination weight then permitted 38 tons, the LB140 offered around 9.2 horsepower per ton. Most of its competitors managed roughly 7. On a long alpine climb, that difference isn't a statistic. It's the difference between crawling in low gear and driving up the mountain. Operators could run tighter schedules with the same driver and the same fuel stop. Drivers could hear a 140 coming from a long way off, and that hammering Vate note became part of European road culture. Then came 1973 and the oil crisis. Overnight, fuel got expensive, and a big, powerful truck looked less like an asset and more like a liability. Every manufacturer had to respond. Scania's answer arrived in 1976 with the 141 series, and it was clever rather than brutal. The revised DS14 made more power, 375 horsepower, but at only 2,000 RPM instead of 2,300. At the same time, maximum torque rose by 19% to 1,480 Newton-meters, delivered lower down at 1,300 RPM. Scania achieved this with improved cylinder heads and a more efficient turbocharger pushing around 13% more air into the engine, along with new injection pump, valves, camshaft and pistons. Paired with a 10-speed range-change synchromesh gearbox, it meant a driver could pull harder while revving less and burn less fuel doing it. That is the low revs philosophy that defines heavy diesel engineering to this day. And the 141 is where it went mainstream. There is one more detail worth appreciating about how Scania approached this engine. It was not a marketing exercise bolted onto an existing platform. The V8 was engineered from the ground up for high cylinder pressures, with individual cylinder heads under distinctive V-shaped covers, which meant a workshop could service one cylinder without dismantling the top of the entire engine. That is the kind of decision a company makes when it expects an engine to survive 1,000,000 kilometers in the hands of someone who is paid by the load, not by the hour. And the engine did exactly that. The LB140 became the most desired truck in Europe. Drivers treated the cab as a home. Operators treated the badge as a statement. And the Scania V8, born in 1969, is still in production more than half a century later, the longest-running V8 story in trucking. Which one would you have wanted to drive? Tell me in the comments, and if you want more stories from the golden age of European trucking, subscribe because there are plenty left.